What is going on, investors? Hope you guys are doing well out there. It is Friday. It's a very special Friday. That is because it is time for the FAANG Stock Recap Show here on the Investor Channel, where every Friday we recap all the major news and the technical chart patterns from all the major FAANG stocks. But it's also special because we are on earnings eve for a lot of these companies. Next week, we'll hear from Microsoft, Meta, and Tesla, among other companies. So we're very excited to be discussing that and a ton. We've got a ton of AI news, data center news from all of these companies. We've got Apple potentially falling behind the rest of these companies. Man, we've got a lot to get to. Better kick things off like we always do with Meta Platforms. Start of the week, it's 6:15. Ba-boom, ratcheting things up higher, moving to a 52-week high as we move into earnings, just like we thought. We thought that Meta, in particularly, just technically as well, that this stock was going to set up at what we call kind of the top of the range as you move into earnings. Now, that does set up kind of a high bar that the company needs to come when they get to earnings, at least technically. Fundamentally, you probably think so as well with Meta, since they have a relatively steady business model, pretty predictable business model. It's hard for them to surprise to the upside, but they've done it in the past, and we'll see if they're able to do that this week as Meta setting up close to a 52-week high, right around $647. Like we said from the top, we've got Microsoft, Meta, and Tesla reporting their earnings next week. Not exactly sure the days. My apologies. I do an earnings calendar. I'll post it on my social media. I just haven't gotten to that yet. If it is on Wednesday, I will just let you guys know any earnings on Wednesday will be posted later in the day, later than I'm able to typically get to them. Just got a commitment on Wednesday. Now, Instagram heads now testing those ads over on Threads for some brands here in the United States. Threads is interesting, okay? I'm starting to use my Instagram, my social feeds, the guys, my investors in my company, they're like, man, you need to start blowing up your social media. It's like, okay, we can certainly do that. And I've just noticed, anything that you post to Instagram kind of automatically goes to Threads. So I don't know how many people are just like going to Threads independently. I suppose there is some activity over there, and there's probably opportunities to, at least if you're a brand and you're already advertising on Meta, which most are, or Instagram, you can kind of transfer or test an ad over on Threads. So we'll see what happens here. Could bring in some incremental revenue for the company. Now, Mark Zuckerberg, in the past, folks, like billionaires used to get their mega mansions. Maybe they got a yacht. Some of these guys got real fancy, like private jets and those types of things. I tell you what, I think we've moved into a new age. The mega yacht is now the mega data center, because every single day, some tech billionaire is trying to grab their crotch and brag about how much they're spending on an AI data center. And the great thing about this, guys, is there's not a ton of like publicly traded yacht making companies or watch brands or whatever these guys tend to spend their money on. But we can all make money when they're spending their money on data centers. So that's what's fantastic about this. And Mark Zuckerberg plans to shell out $65 billion on a single data center that can cover a, quote, significant part of Manhattan. So these guys are busting out the measuring stick and the dollar amounts, and we'll get to the Project Stargate here in a second. But the stakes just continue to get raised higher and higher, as this will be a single data center. Now, this is really interesting. They're planning to invest $60 to $65 billion in an artificial intelligence infrastructure. Folks, this is going to be in 2025. So this is money that's going to be spent very, very quickly. They plan to exit 2025 with more than 1.3 million GPUs at its disposal. I think that's a significant bump over where they currently at. Now, President Trump, it's not wasting any time. He had a busy first week as he revoked some former President Joe Biden orders on AI policies. These AI policies, I think if you dug into them, were they being followed? Was it something that really mattered to the AI market? I think you can kind of debate that, but there were some things in these executive orders. And again, executive order is not law. These presidents can put this down on stationery. Doesn't mean that people necessarily will follow that action. But in this case, the AI action plan did involve the government and had some oversight. That is basically, those handcuffs are off. And it is now back to the wild, wild west, which I think we were in with AI, but this makes it official. You can pretty much do whatever the heck you want. Now, there is an AI action plan coming, headed by David Sachs, among others, in the Trump administration. My guess, it'll be very light from a regulatory perspective, and you can pretty much do whatever the heck you want. Now, Meta is working with Oakley on some smart glasses. They also plan for a watch, which was kind of an interesting product. Also earbuds, they're entering that. And obviously they're looking to compete with Apple, which we'll talk about here in a second. Oakley, I think, is also, it might be still owned by Luxottica, so it's basically kind of the same company as Ray-Bans. I'm not exactly sure. But when I was at CES a couple of weeks ago, I mean, there was a ton of these major brands with smart glasses, but then there was a ton of these, like, I guess you could call them like Chinese third-party brands as well. So this is going to be really, really big. I mean, I think most people at some point will get it. If you wear glasses like I do, like constantly, you're probably going to have not necessarily a pair of Metas, but you're going to have a pair of glasses that have some speakers built in, maybe an assistant, or it does something. I think that's going to be pretty standard features for a lot of glasses. Now, this was really interesting as well. Now, if you're not in the nuances of creating content and those types of things, so you probably don't exactly know what's going on. But for the, back to like the Stone Ages when I started video editing and podcasting, I mean, this is like, I started a podcast like 15 years ago. I've been doing websites for about 20 years. And so the landscape has changed. Adobe had a big monopoly and kind of a stranglehold. I think it's probably a better way to put it on video editing, picture editing with Photoshop, and other parts of the market. Over the years, especially over the past couple of years, you've had many entrants come into that. Probably most notably, you have Canva competing with Photoshop, but also other video editing tools that are now built into the actual social media platforms. The biggest one right now is probably CapCut, which it turns out it's actually owned by TikTok, and it was banned along with TikTok on Sunday, and the CapCut ban carried over for several days. So that was interesting that Meta planned this announcement right as TikTok and CapCut got banned. They announced a new video editing app. Again, I don't think this necessarily impacts TikTok or CapCut or really any social media site. Who this impacts is actually Adobe. If I don't need Adobe products as much, which I'm certainly sitting there in the boat, I used to pay for their entire suite of product. I actually just downgraded my Adobe subscription down to one of the lowest tiers because I really only need access to one of their programs, where in the past I used to use 3 or 4. And the fact that Meta is now getting into the video editing game and we're able to shoot these videos and then edit them right inside the app, yeah, that is going to impact the company. Now, TikTok parent company ByteDance is set aside $12 billion in spending on chips. So we have Mark Zuckerberg spending $65 billion. I think that's to a single data center. You have ByteDance with $12 billion. We'll talk about Project Stargate, whether it's $10 billion, $500 billion, who knows? We got a lot of money spent on data centers. Now, moving on to Apple. Start of the week at 222. Company ended up finishing flat, and I think that's probably how you can describe Apple's results and maybe where the company is right now, a little bit flat. That is because the company just tapped a new software veteran, an internal hire here. This is not an external veteran. This is somebody that has been with the company for 36 years, but they are looking for him to help the company fix what they call their AI issues. I tell you what, when you have Silicon Valley finally firing on all cylinders, I mean, the past 10 years, you guys have probably seen it here on the show, and I think I've complained about it, that, big tech technology for a while there wasn't very innovative. We were talking about the share buybacks and maybe some earbuds or like this incremental feature. Now we're getting true innovation. And the fact that Apple is sitting on the sideline and they're looking to fix their issues rather than innovate, it's not a good place to be. Not a good place to be, but we'll see if Apple can get their act together. Now, Wedbush, who's like kind of the pumper in chief of a lot of these stocks, they say the fear is overdone and they think a turnaround is in the cards. Although we've been hearing this for about a year, Apple rolled out that Apple Intelligence, which looked great on their presentation. I tell you what, whoever makes the Apple presentations probably should make a lot of money, because whenever you see this from a presentation standpoint, it looks really good. And then when you get it on the phone, I don't have the Apple Intelligence features on my phone, but I do have them on my computer. They're hard to find. I can see how the average person doesn't even know what this feature does unless you are actively looking for it. Now, iPhone sales. This is probably the worst news for Apple this week. Apple sales fell 18% in China in Q4 amid increasing competition. How do they turn that around? They have to do it through innovating on the device. It's going to be difficult in that Chinese market. And I tell you what, without that Chinese market in Apple's corner, it's going to be hard to increase your sales. Moving on to Amazon. Start of the week at about $229 per share. Finished up about 2.37%. Finished the week at 234. I think last year I did a video right at the beginning of the year. My old employer wanted me to do this video where I made these big predictions or whatever. Probably not a video I would do normally, but one of my calls was, I think Amazon is going to overtake Apple. I think that call was probably a year too far in advance. And I think if I were to caveat it, I probably would have given Amazon maybe 2 years to do that. I think this year could legitimately be the year. I think you have Apple sitting at about $3.4 trillion valuation. You've got Amazon sitting at 2.5. Could be the year. It's going to be tough. Amazon's really going to have to execute well. Apple's going to have to fall on its face a little bit. But both could actually happen now. This headline's kind of interesting. Amazon plans to eliminate all of its facilities in Quebec. Now, this happens to be just fulfillment centers, sorting centers, and delivery stations. They're still going to operate in Quebec, but they're going to use third parties instead. Now, here's the really interesting thing, is that the decision only affects Amazon's unionized workforce in Canada. So this is why some people get on here and they say, oh, you're anti-union. I just look at it from a very practical sense that for starting a union, especially in a company that doesn't already have one, can have massive consequences, including the company saying, yeah, we're going to get rid of 1,700 of you, including 250 positions that were temporary. So 2,000 people lost their job because the union got started. Now, whether or not this is legal, whether or not this is ethical, that's a whole different discussion. But starting a union has consequences. And in Quebec, it means that Amazon basically kicked them all to the curb. Amazon, as you can imagine, is certainly anti-union. Now, company suspended some drone deliveries after 2 training crashes. Not a good sign. Company was testing these in Pendleton, Oregon. And unfortunately, you had an accident or a crash. I don't think anybody was hurt, which is good, but you did have a fire start, which obviously out here in California is certainly a sensitive situation. You can't have these drones flying around, especially out here in California where you can't even touch the forest or rake it up or anything like that. Well, yeah, you could start a massive fire. And so we'll see what happens. The company blamed some software issue and some light rain. And so clearly these drones, at least the ones that Amazon are using, are not ready for prime time. Speaking of prime time, we had Netflix earnings this week, and the company started the week at about $868. Boom, up like a rocket ship, up over $977, including a new 52-week high, $999. That'd be $999. You're up over 12% this week on Netflix. Now, I recorded a video of the earnings earlier this week. Revenue was up about 16%. Everything looked really good. I read through the Netflix conference call, which is really kind of cool because it's more like Q&A and stuff. The company was super bullish, their ad business. In fact, I think the quote was, I think they doubled their business last year in ads, and they plan to double it again this year. So the company is super bullish, and the ad business is seeing, I think, 55% of new signups where they have an ad tier. 55% are coming into the ad tier. So people, at least the incrementally new subscriber to Netflix, at least from like kind of a 55% isn't a strong majority, but is it a majority of the users are actually signing up for the ad tier? Certainly bullish for the company from an ad perspective. Moving on to Nvidia. Started the week at 138, up about 3%, finished the week at 142. Not a ton of direct news directly from Nvidia, but obviously we have to connect the dots. UBS sees $9 billion of Blackwell revenue in Q4. Now, I had a private conversation on the show floor of CES with let's call it one of these data center providers, we'll put it that. I would say based on my conversation with them, $9 billion in revenue in Q4 seems very, very reasonable. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a decent number over that. Now, Project Stargate received an official announcement from Trump. There he is standing with the great Larry Ellison. You've got Sam Altman, and you have, I think that is Masa Son. They announced a 4-year initiative, which is already kind of, apparently it looks like it's already broken ground. You already have a site in Texas where this thing is kind of getting built out. It's really interesting. I've also read through more recently the Oracle conference call. Talk about bullish. You get a dip in Oracle stock. It hasn't happened more recently. You get any dip in Oracle stock. I haven't read through many more bullish conference calls than their last one. They're creating these modular data centers. That's going to go in here. Company's firing on all cylinders, also from a software perspective. But you got a $500 billion 4-year initiative. Now, what you did have is some CEOs start to clap back, including the Anthropic CEO, Musk. Now, these guys do have, I think you could say, like a bone to pick with Sam Altman. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Sam Altman's got the most punchable face in tech. I don't trust him. I think he's a little sleazy and a little slimy. And by the way, why are you wearing these brown shoes with this suit? It doesn't look good, but nonetheless, I think he's talented. I think he's running a pretty cool business there. So Anthropic and Musk, who have, plenty of bones to pick with him, they're going to raise some questions about this Project Stargate. Musk brought up on Twitter that I think there was only about $10 billion secured, or at least well under that. That's according to his sources over at SoftBank. Certainly, if you look at SoftBank's balance sheet, OpenAI's, even Oracle's, none of them have anywhere close to $500 billion. Now, some of the commentary that I looked at is what they announced this $500 billion, and because they have Trump in the room, I think they channeled their inner Trump and a little, how Trump is known to exaggerate things. I mean, the list goes on with the guy. The guy constantly exaggerates, okay? And so this $500 billion is not necessarily cash that these companies are going to have to pull out of their pocket and pay for a data center, but it could be the actual value that they create. Who knows? But the bottom line is we get caught up in the drama and those types of things. But guess who benefits? Is Nvidia. Whether it's $500 billion, $50 billion, $10 billion, it doesn't matter. A good portion of it, probably 60 or 70% of the dollars, are going to flow right to Nvidia. So the more of this that happens, the better it is for that company. Now, this headline kind of supports what I just kind of went over, is that it's really just the start of massive investments here in the United States. You have this measuring contest, if you will, from these tech executives who can spend the most on AI this year. And, instead of spending the most on buybacks and this other stuff that benefited you a little bit as a shareholder, I think we can make a ton of money as investors as these guys have these AI data center measuring contests. And we're just going to have a great time finding stocks to invest in. Moving on to Google, started the week at 200, basically ended the week flat right at $200. Now, OpenAI continues to launch new features in their ChatGPT that performs tasks. This is going to be part of the story in 2025, is these GPTs are going to get a little more capable. Instead of saying, hey, write me an essay on dinosaurs, you might be able to, stagger your request and do more things. I'll get to it when I get to Microsoft, but there's a lot of things coming from, they call them agents, but it's really just more advanced AIs. Now, Perplexity, we've got a lot of competition in big tech now. I haven't seen that over the past couple of years. I mean, these big tech companies, especially during COVID, just absolutely dominated. They weren't seeing a lot of new entrants. There wasn't a lot of competition. That is changing really rapidly. You have this Perplexity, which I'll admit, I haven't used Perplexity. I haven't even really checked it out. So you guys will have to let me know down in the comments if this is worth using. Is it worth looking at? Is it just kind of cool, or is it like a legit competitor? But they just unveiled a new AI assistant on Android apps as the competition just continues to heat up. But for Google's sake, they obviously have the cloud of a Google or a DOJ breakup, a potential forced sale of their Chrome business, maybe government oversight of their search business. The more competition heats up, well, the more the company has an argument in court that it's no longer a monopoly. Moving on to Microsoft. Speaking of monopolies and losing in court, the company knows all about that. Microsoft started the week at 427. Boom, up, hit a beautiful level. Technically, you should have bought Microsoft shares. And I'm not saying that in hindsight. We literally were on the show and we showed you Microsoft from a technical perspective and was like, yeah, you should buy it here. And yeah, guess what? That's exactly what I did. Microsoft up this week, about 3.4% heading into earnings at about $444. A reminder with Microsoft is when they report earnings, you don't get guidance for the next quarter until about an hour into the conference call, 30 minutes into the conference call. So about an hour and a half almost after they announce earnings, you don't get guidance. So if you have Robinhood or one of these 24-hour apps, I would just, you invest how you want. Just understand that Microsoft makes a move in the after hours, then they don't give guidance until later. And so you have to just factor that in with the price movement in the after hours. Now, OpenAI is launching a shopping agent. So this is what's coming down the pipe with AI. So with this, you might be able to complete various shopping tasks. Some of the examples that I've seen here is you might be able to put inside ChatGPT like a grocery list. You need milk, you need cereal, you need this, you need that. And then instead of having to go onto an app like Instacart and individually click add to cart, all that stuff, you can just give it the list and then Instacart will complete your grocery order for you. It's kind of cool. Honestly, it probably will be useful. Other examples that they showed off was maybe like booking a restaurant, like, I don't know, how hard is it to book my own restaurant? I mean, how lazy am I to have to type that into OpenAI rather than just go to OpenTable? I don't know, but there's some other features here that are interesting. I've seen features also shown off on Google where it's like, find me a mountain bike. I want it to be red. I want to be able to pick it up later today, and I want it to be $400. And then AI kind of goes through the search filters. I'm sure this will get more advanced going forward, and obviously anytime you tie to e-commerce, there's a lot of opportunity for revenue and advertising. Now, the company wants to develop, this is OpenAI, that agent with the skills of an engineer. I didn't mention this, but when Meta announced their big data center that is planned to be announced, the $65 billion one, Mark Zuckerberg said, we are going to build the capability of an AI engineer. In fact, I think he was on the Joe Rogan podcast and he said that we are going to build AI engineers to where Meta doesn't really even need software engineers. And so this obviously has a huge impact on the company from a bottom line perspective. We look at how much the company is going to spend here, $65 billion. But if it could eliminate the need for them to hire very expensive engineers. I've heard people even get in the comments of my videos, oh, AI is only getting rid of like low-end work. No, actually, it's the opposite. You're getting rid of these $300,000, $400,000 a year jobs out here in Silicon Valley. That's why the office space is basically empty. That's why every time I'm in San Francisco, I'm like, where's the traffic? It's like where I live in the Valley of California, there's traffic like I've never seen before. You go to San Francisco and there's like no traffic. And it's because these companies have been able to get rid of their workers, and they're going to continue to be able to get rid of them. And OpenAI, Meta working on this stuff, yeah, you are going to see a far less need for engineers. Now, socially, is this a good idea? I don't know. I'm just telling you what's going to happen. Now, the company is going to launch new GPT features. Talked about this when we were at Google, and they're just going to continue to roll this out. It will be an exciting year from a feature perspective. Moving on to Tesla, start of the week at 414.69, ended lower. One of the few stocks in the group to finish lower by about 2%, finished week at 406. Talked about this a week or so ago, but you've got a new redesigned Model Y. I tell you what, if you're not a car person and from 30 feet away, the cars look very similar, but you get up close and there are some interesting designs, including in the back seat, there's a screen where the air conditioner is. And my son totally wants me to trade in our Model Y for a new one. And I was like, dude, no, I'm keeping this Model Y until the wheels fall off at least a little bit. Company plans to hike prices in Canada next month. That should be music to your ears as a Tesla shareholder. You want this company to continue to raise prices if it can. Now, on the social media side, got the Saudi crown prince. That dude's got a lot of money. He's interested in TikTok if Musk and others are involved in the deal. And Musk either is involved in this TikTok deal or he's getting dragged into it. We'll see if he's able to do that. If he's able to pull that off, then obviously he controls a vast swath of social media sites. In fact, probably even ones that are bigger than what Mark Zuckerberg owns, at least from kind of a reach perspective. So we'll see what happens here. Didn't really talk about it, but obviously TikTok had that it was banned for like 24 hours. I think Trump gave them 75 days to work something out. See what happens and if they're able to pull that off. This headline's a little misleading. It says Trump 2.0 brings volatility to the Chinese electric vehicle. It really should be kind of globally. The Chinese market already has 100% tariffs. President Joe Biden put 100% tariff on electric vehicles coming out of China. That's why when you're at CES and you see some of these vehicles, none of them could actually be sold here in the United States. The Chinese has a lot of electric vehicles that will never be here in the United States because of 100% tariff. That impacts companies like XPeng, Li Auto, Zeekr, which had a big presence at CES, NIO, among others. Now, what it does, interestingly enough, is the president threatened a, quote, 60% tariff on other parts of the market, a 25% tariff on Mexico in particular. A lot of components and parts, and even some of these cars, are being made in Mexico. So if you do have a 25% tariff in Mexico, that'll impact a lot of the parts that get manufactured there to get shipped here. Also, the cars made there, 25% tariff would probably make that unprofitable. We'll see what happens here again with Trump. I think you guys know the drill. He says stuff, the media reports on it, some of the media panics on it. What ends up happening at the end can be nothing really that big of a deal. So we'll see what happens. Now, he also revokes former President Biden's push for 50% EVs sold by 2030. That gives probably Tesla an advantage, as these companies were basically forced to make EVs. Now they don't have to do that. Moving over to the technical segment of the show. What else is new? I feel like I've had a broken record really for a while now, really for a couple of years on this show. It's been a broken record. New higher high on the S&P 500. What else is new? We keep talking about pullbacks. The pullbacks are quick and they are brief. And so I think you can continue to expect that. When this rally will run out of steam is really anybody's guess at this point. Meta just made a new higher high. We talked about it during the Meta segment. Made a new higher high on this one. You're setting up here at the top. Company reports their earnings on Wednesday, the 29th. Again, those earnings on Wednesday come a little bit later. Typically, I get to these things kind of right after. At least in this case, I'll be able to read through the conference call, the transcript, or I might be able to sit there and actually listen to it based on what I'm doing. But you don't expect the earnings until actually that evening, just because I have something to do that day. The Apple chart looks kind of ugly. We actually pulled back to an area, though, that we had marked out last week. There is an area of support right here. Okay, you can kind of see it. We could snap on a volume profile, but we don't have to do that. You do have support here at 222. You break through 222 with Apple. There's a new level of support. It's in this area. It's not all the way down here, but you've got another area probably here at 196. Be very excited about Apple. Now, I'm not excited about Apple fundamentally, but technically, I would buy it. You get down here to 194.95. Apple, you don't get their earnings until Thursday, the 30th. So we are actually 6 days away from them reporting earnings as well. Moving on to Amazon. Just confirmed a new higher high. Just as this company is on eve of earnings, you get those on Thursday the 30th as well. Setting up towards the top. The expectations are high, at least from a technical perspective. See if these companies are able to meet them. Amazon, technically, you get pullbacks, and we'll talk about this when the company reports earnings. As you pull back with Amazon, could create some buying opportunities. Netflix just blasted off to a new high. Typically, when you blasted these new highs, you come back and do a back test. The first back test would be back here at 917. Dying to get into Netflix. That's your area. We don't get Nvidia earnings for a while. In fact, you don't get these till next month. So we're about a month away. February 26th is the date I have. This one still looks absolutely beautiful. Fundamentally, everything firing on all cylinders, obviously, for Nvidia. Google also setting up at the top of the range, technically. Can be a dangerous area. Interestingly enough, Google doesn't report their earnings until the following week on Tuesday the 4th. They must have some executive conflicts. It's typically what delays these, at least from a week perspective, because they tend to report the same day as Microsoft and Apple and Amazon. So you don't get them till the week later, but you just confirmed a new higher high. You're setting up at the top. That can, I don't know. You probably could do some back testing on this. In my memory serves me, that tends to get rejected more than you blast to a new high. So, be alert next week. You could have some buying opportunities. Microsoft was in a buying opportunity. It's actually this gold line here. It's represented also by this green box, which you could expand. You're close enough to these things. Especially if it's a long-term position. If you're trading, be very exact. Buy the stock when it's at 414.27. Be as exact as possible. If this is a long-term retirement position, I would advise you not to, pinch pennies on these types of things. It's much better to be in Microsoft than to save 15 cents or risk not getting filled on the stock. This one has bounced off this area at 415 and has moved higher. You're expecting a new higher high. This one's actually, what's interesting about Microsoft is we're not setting up at the top of the range. So if this one reports somewhat decent earnings, you get up there in the 480s pretty quick on this one. They report their earnings on Wednesday. Finally, Tesla is now kind of hovering at this resistance area. It's kind of support resistance up here at about 420-ish. That area, it's going to be tough for Tesla to really get up and above that. They report their earnings on the 29th, but you already have delivery numbers. Tesla you're kind of telegraphing these things. They don't really give you guidance over at Tesla. It really just comes down to like Elon Musk hyping himself on a conference call. He certainly can do that as well as just about anyone. Maybe he has some clarity on regulatory stuff going on with Trump. There could be a number of different things they talk about. I know that there's been some bullish commentary about Optimus starting production, having those in the Tesla facilities here like later this year. Could be some bullish stuff, but you are setting up at the top of the range for Tesla. You're looking for pullbacks on this one. You get those. It's a buying opportunity, folks. That was the FAANG Stock Recap Show for Friday, January 24th. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Got some big football games this weekend. I got some bets on the line, including maybe something from Louis Vuitton if the Chiefs happen to win. So I am actually not a big Chiefs fan. Being a Bengals fan, it's hard to root for the Chiefs, but when something from Louis is on the line, you know who I'm going to be pulling for. Hopefully your team does well, and hopefully they make it to the Super Bowl. And my advice to you is if your team makes it to the Super Bowl is in Louisiana this year, and you better get on a plane, and you should go. It's totally worth it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's show. I'll see you again next week. Got a big earnings week next week, some big market making stuff. Carve out some time. Make sure you're paying attention to these markets because there's a lot of money to be made. We'll be back to talk about it next week. Thanks again for everything, and good luck with your investments.